Hello and welcome. I'm Asuma Katogota and you're watching the Africa Brief on NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top stories of this hour. ICC judges have sentenced the Sudanese Ali Muhammad Ali Abdul Rahman, a 76-year-old former Janjaweed leader, to 20 years in prison for 31 counts of war crimes and crimes against humanity in Darfur. According to reports, Sudanese soldiers who fled the capture of the Heglig oil field by RSF forces have surrendered in South Sudan. This comes as the UN warns the RSF's rapid territorial gains could trigger a new wave of mass displacement. The U.S. Treasury sanctioned 4 individuals and 4 entities, mostly Colombian, for recruiting fighters, including child soldiers, to support Sudan's Rapid Support Forces in what it is now called the world's worst ongoing humanitarian crisis, as the U.S. has urged all external actors to stop backing Sudan's warring parties and support a ceasefire. According to reports, Rwanda-backed M-23 rebels have entered the key eastern DRC city of Uvira, prompting security concerns. More than 30,000 people have fled to Burundi as the group calls for a buffer zone. Tensions are rising in Tanzania as it faces consequences after authorities labeled and stopped a planned Independence Day protests as an attempted coup, with heavy security deployments, at least 10 arrests, and warnings following October's deadly post-election crackdown. Washington may treat South Africa differently if Congress extends the African Growth and Opportunity Act, has warned South Africa must lower tariffs and remove trade barriers to reduce U.S. duties. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has said that the country could hold elections within 60 to 90 days if the U.S. and Europe provide security guarantees. He further added that Kyiv would move to change the law once those guarantees are secured. Chinese Defense Ministry has cited that annual joint strategic patrol with Russia hours after South Korea said that aircraft did not violate airspace. He further stated that China and Russia had carried out their 10th joint strategic patrol in the airspace above the East China Sea and Western Pacific. Now we start from Rwanda. According to reports, Rwanda-backed M-23 rebels have entered the key eastern Democratic Republic of Congo's city of Uvira, prompting thousands of civilians to flee into neighboring Burundi. The advancement comes just days after Rwanda and DRC leaders signed a U.S. and Qatar-brokered peace agreement in Washington. The United States and European powers have urged Rwanda and M23 to immediately halt the offensive, warning that the violence has destabilizing potential for the entire region. The coalition also called on M23 to return to its previous positions and uphold commitments made in July negotiations in Qatar. Local officials report chaos in Uvira, with fighting ongoing in surrounding villages including Luvundi, Sange, and Kaziba. M23 leaders have reiterated support for peace talks and suggested establishing a buffer zone to protect civilians. Meanwhile, the UN says over 30,000 people have fled eastern DRC, with at least 74 people killed and dozens wounded in recent clashes, highlighting the humanitarian toll of the renewed fighting. Now for this discussion, we welcome Mr. Lukbenga Paul. He's a public affairs analyst, joins us live from Lagos. Thank you very much, Mr. Paul, for joining us again. Good to see you. Now looking at this, what can we say about how is this ceasefire that's supposed to be actually holding place in this region? Do you think that U.S. and the countries who have signed this ceasefire deal, they are not they're not aware of the realities on the ground?
Well, the I thought that the ceasefire would, have an effect in stopping hostilities. I had expected that maybe for a few days, the very first few days of the ceasefires, there will be continuation, because it's not like something that you can switch off and switch on like electric bulb, But I had expected that as we are easing into the second week since the agreement had been signed, that hostilities would have reduced. But this renewed hostilities and attack from the Rwandan-backed M-23 rebels suggests one thing, that there are certain elements who don't want American players to join the fray in the mining industry right there in Eastern Congo, and they will do everything to frustrate the peace deal that would allow American organizations to operate freely in that area. So, and I don't know what Rwanda stands to gain, but I know nothing goes for nothing, that there must have been, of course, certain benefit that accrues to Rwanda, that this new deal with the US is not taken care of properly or enough to the level of what they are currently getting, and that might be the reason. And it might also be a case of a monster that they have fed for a long time, that has become too powerful for them to now curtail. That might also be the case right there. But the humanitarian damage that this is doing to young children, to women, even to men in the area, is taking a toll and shredding every fabric of society. And like I've said on one of your previous programs, that many children grew up, many people who are 30, 40 now in that region grew up knowing violence only all through their life. They don't know anything else. And we are taught that an end to this hostility will make people be getting introduced to a new normal where there is peace, where there is prosperity, where people can actually sleep with their two eyes closed, where people can cultivate their farms and be sure that they will be the one to harvest it. But this renewed hostility has shattered all hopes of that. And I know that if U.S. interest is not taken care of peacefully by allowing the peace deal to rule, I'm sure that surreptitiously behind the scene, U.S. will come in with its own brute force to get what it wants eventually. And on the long run, it is the people of Rwanda, Burundi, and DR Congo that will suffer the catastrophic effect of having such boots on the ground in the region. And so it is better for them to find a way to resolve this M23 rebel question, and also all the other small rebel groups that are local players in several different regions that even M23 rebel is not controlling.
100% hopefully that the significance of this situation is understood by those in charge. But thank you very much, Mr. Paul, for sharing that. Please stay with us as we come back to you for our next discussion as well. Now moving the focus to Sudan, South Sudanese army has said that Sudanese soldiers who fled the capture of their country's largest oil field by the paramilitary forces have laid down their arms in neighboring South Sudan. The Heglig oil field is near the border with South Sudan in Sudan's southern Kordofan, which has become the epicenter of the Sudanese civil war after the paramilitary rapid support forces took control of the entire Darfur region in the west of the country in October. Meanwhile, the head of the UN Refugee Agency has warned that the rapid support forces have made significant territorial advances amid the conflict, raising fears of a fresh wave of displacement in Sudan. According to Filippo Grandi, the RSF's recent takeover of the city of Al Fashir in Darfur and continued expansion east into the Kordofan region could escalate the Sudan crisis, particularly if violence spreads to major cities. Now for this discussion, we welcome back Mr. Ayanuga Olugbenga Paul. He's a public affairs analyst, joins us live from Lagos, Nigeria. Thank you very much, Mr. Paul, for staying with us. Now looking at this, How could this surrender of Sudanese soldiers in South Sudan affect this impression of what's going on? What do you think led to them surrounding in the neighboring country? And also, what political and economic implications might the RSF's capture of this key oil-producing area have for Sudan?
This case speaks to when the negotiations started earlier on, and the Sudanese government were saying that they are not willing to negotiate because of the fact that they feel Qatar is one of the major sponsors of all these RSF and some other rebel groups who are players in the region. I said it back then that the earlier they come to negotiation table, the better it will be for them, because the more territory RSF take, the more emboldened they are. And we know that, quite all right, in most African nations, many of the infantrymen in the armed forces are not usually well taken care of. And so they see how their bosses, their generals, their colonels live large, and they in the infantry are not well taken care of. It will discourage them. And so this recent surrender by the Sudanese forces, it speaks to that, and it reminds me of the case of Chiang Kai-shek and Mao Zedong back in between 1939 and 1940s, where Chiang Kai-shek thought that the Mao Zedong rebels will not be able to take the country in China, and rather than negotiate in time to resolve the problem, they were even, partnering with Japan to thinking that they could decimate Mao Zedong army, until the Mao Zedong army were able to eventually enter the capital city. So I hope that will not be the case in this Sudan situation, because the RSF have been known to commit a lot of war crimes, to kill civilians wantonly. And so if such group and organization take hold of the government tightly, it might be a terrible situation for the country. So, and that is why I am afraid that if they keep on this offensive and they keep succeeding like they are right now, it will be terrible for the civilian masses in that country. And of course, the battle is spreading also into South Sudan, who has its own fair share of trouble already. The political tension between their President Salva Kiir and many of the opposition in that country. So having this battle cross-border is also something that, if care is not taken, it may lead to escalation. What we have seen thus far in terms of human casualty will be a child's play compared to what is coming. And so I believe that the government of Sudan needs to find a way quickly, if it is going to be renewed negotiation, if it is going to be rearmament or whatever, to bolster and boost the morale of the infantrymen who are on the ground, to be able to fight to defend their country.
100%. Thank you for emphasizing and highlighting that. Always great learning from you, Mr. Ayanaga Olugbengapol. With that, I would like to end the discussion. Thank you very much. Now, moving on to our next news, the United States has imposed sanctions on a Colombian network which was recruiting former Colombian military members to train soldiers and fight as mercenaries in Sudan's civil war conflict. As Secretary of State Marco Rubio has called Egypt and Saudi Arabia as part of the mediation efforts. The moves comes as fighting has intensified in the brutal conflict between the Sudanese army and the paramilitary rapid support forces, which broke out in 2023. Including the sanctions are Alvaro Andres Quijano Becerra, a retired Colombian military officer, and his wife, an employment agency manager named Mateo Andres Docu Botero, and a number of staffing agencies that have allegedly processed payroll for the Colombian fighters. The United States has imposed sanctions on a Colombian network which has recruiting which has been recruiting former Colombian military members to train soldiers and fight as mercenaries in Sudan's civil war conflict. As Secretary of State Marco Rubio has called Egypt and Saudi Arabia to be part of the mediation. The move comes as fighting has intensified in the brutal conflict between the Sudanese army and the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces, which broke out in 2023. Included in the sanctions are Alvaro Andres Quijano Becerra, a retired Colombian military officer, and his wife, an employment agency manager named Mateo Andres Duque Botero, and a number of staffing agencies that have allegedly processed payroll for the Colombian fighters. Now we move on to our next news. The United States Trade Representative Jamieson Greer has said that Washington is open to treating South Africa differently from other African nations. This would apply to if Congress decides to move forward with extending the African Growth and Opportunity Act, AGOA, which expired in September this year. Greer has told the Senate Appropriations that subcommittee that the Trump administration supports a year extension but considers South Africa a unique problem, indicating it could be excluded from the trade program if lawmakers push for it. He has stressed that South Africa must lower tariffs and remove non-tariff barriers on U.S. goods if it wants Washington to reduce its 30% duties on South African imports. South Africa has responded by saying it remains committed to staying in AGOA and will keep lobbying for renewal in its current form. Tensions between these two countries have escalated following U.S. boycotts of the recent G20 event in South Africa. Now for this discussion, we welcome retired Major General Sudakarji. He's an international relations and defense expert, joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much, Major General, for joining us again. Good to see you. Now, looking at this, how could this potential differential treatment of South Africa under AGOA, how do you think this will be affecting further U.S. and South Africa relations and regional economic alliances among them?
Soma, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Thank you for taking me for your show.
Thank
The relationship between USA and South Africa has been at a lowest ebb for quite some time. And ever since Donald Trump came to power, this has taken a further nosedive, and for different reasons. One of the reasons is that the white people are being discriminated, they're being killed, and there are extrajudicial killings taking place, disappearances, whether they're true or false. One really has to trust the open source of media. And the South African government has been always saying that these are all false informations. It is being built against South Africa for no rhyme or reason, just to put pressure on BRICS, because the larger picture has to be understood. Only then the smaller one can be put in place. The biggest objective of Donald Trump or USA as of now is to marginalize BRICS and the countries who are affiliated or likely to be affiliated to BRICS. South Africa happens to be one of the leading members of BRICS. So this is one aspect. Second aspect, as far as the political discrimination or the difference of opinion that you have raised, I tend to actually agree to some extent that for a change, this particular issue may actually boomerang in times ahead, and it may blow up on the face of USA if it is not handled in a deft manner. And third and the last point is that, well, every issue, every situation in the world order today, which is passing through a geopolitical churn, cannot last forever. It is not everlasting. For example, the USA's doctrine or the national security strategy has undergone a change. There is a significant change which has got published 3-4 days back. There is a huge change because USA is gradually shifting towards Monroe Doctrine, that is to look after the backyard, the Americas, rather than frittering away its resources world over. So with this kind of a change, when the focus is shifting to America alone across the Atlantic, that is North America and South America, I doubt if this particular issue will at all, if at all, it is likely to boomerang against anyone, particularly USA. So therefore, in times ahead, I personally feel, for the sake of stability and progress that the USA is intending to make in lines of making America great again, I think this is likely to dilute in its effort and may die its own death. Back to you, please.
Right. And before it dies out, what do you think, what strategic leverage does the U.S. gain by, conditioning South Africa's inclusion, also, not inviting South Africa to G20, and pushing South Africa into the corner like this?
Excellent question. I must compliment you because your question is basically reading between the lines. Um, you see, there is an old saying, when you point a finger at anybody, there are three fingers pointing at you. So when you are putting pressure on one, gradually in 21st century, the geopolitical dynamics in the world order has gravitated from geopolitics to geoeconomics. And geoeconomics, it is driven and led by China. And when I say China, if you compare, if you have time, I'll just take 2 odd minutes to explain.
Yes,
In
please go ahead.
1995, the GDP of the BRICS had not come into existence. BRICS came into existence in 2008-9. But the BRICS countries put together, they used to enjoy 16% of the GDP of the world. And the G7 countries, they had somewhere around 43.06% PPP terms. I'm talking about purchasing power parity. Way back in 95. In 2010, this 43.06% of G7 had come down to 36%, and the 16% of the BRICS countries had gone up to 26%. Now, come 2025, the BRICS countries, the percentage of the GDP, global GDP, has gone up. At places you will find 46%, at places you will find it is 44 to 46%. Whereas relative terms, the G7 countries has come down, it is hovering around 30 to 34%, and primarily because of US, because US has got almost about 30 trillion US dollar economy, and others, they are just about 3 to 4 trillions. So relative terms, you find that the global south is actually taking a quantum jump as far as the economic progress is concerned and the wealth creation is concerned. So gradually, the G7 knows that the coming decades or the balance of 21st century is not their century, it is the century of the global south. If they have to read the writing on the wall, then I would recommend that the calling is for the global south. It is better that they adopt an inclusive system of the geopolitics in the global order rather than adopting an exclusive system and keeping South Africa out. Unfortunately, they will be getting marginalized. The case in point is that 41 countries as on today, they have started resorting to their national or local currency for international transactions whenever they are transacting or exporting or importing any goods. That itself is going to slow down the impact and the dominance of the dollar. Mind you, Asoma, you will bear me out, at the peak period, the dollar had a dominance of 89%. Dollar as the international reserve currency. There are three reserve currencies, as you know, dollar, yen and euro. So dollar is the predominant one. Way back in 70s and 80s. Now, during the pandemic, the dominance came down to 54%. Now I believe because of certain measures, it has recovered to 56 to 59%. The domain experts in economics, they say the day dollar goes down below 50%, that is going to be an irreversible point of no return to United States. Instead of calling it as a declining superpower, you can very well call it as a decline power. And as per my study, by 2030-35, the dollar would have gone down to 35 to 40% of its dominance in the world order as a reserve currency. That is where it is going to stabilize, and it is going to give rise to alternate international reserve currency. For example, the BRICS currency may come into dominance, or the yuan may come into, renminbi may come into dominance. So that is the kind of situation. The geoeconomics is going to drive the global order, and therefore it will be incorrect on part of USA to marginalize and also exclude South Africa, or get after South Africa to actually exclude it from major decisions in the world order. It will be a big mistake. It will be a serious mistake on part of USA. Back to you, please.
Right. I'm always fascinated by how, Major General, you can remember all these in sequence. And just a light note, I would like to ask one last question. Do you think any country, even in BRICS or G7 or G20, come in as a mediator, or let's say maybe individual like Elon Musk, who can mediate between these two countries?
Anything is possible. Anything is possible. But in today's time, mediation is a very difficult. I would advise whoever is coming forward not to get into the mediation part. Brokering peace, mediation is a very tricky issue in 21st century. It was always a tricky issue, but in 21st century it has become very complex to navigate. There are multiple issues. There are multiple stakeholders, hidden and visible. And case in point is Turkey. You will find the name of Turkey figuring out everywhere. Whether it is with the Qatar or Bangladesh or Pakistan or with Israel, it's trying to revive its status of Ummah. Ummah is the apex leader of the Islamic world. It wants to be between Iran, Saudi Arabia and Turkey. It wants to showcase itself, project itself as a leader of the Islamic world, which is not so. So therefore, I would recommend whoever is keen to not to come forward, but to answer your question in specific. Yes, definitely there are stakeholders. Elon Musk, like you were saying, is one of them. He may put his best foot forward, but knowing him, he's too brilliant, too sharp, too intelligent, because he's already burnt his finger as heading the DOGE, Department of Government Efficiency Organization. I doubt if at all he makes any headway on this. One thing can happen is that between USA and South Africa, maybe the European Union, perhaps UK, France and Germany, they may come together for the purposes of the negotiation, if at all somebody comes up.
100%. With that, I would like to thank Major General Sudakarji for joining us as always and sharing that insight as an international relations and defense expert from New Delhi. Thank you very much. Now we move on to Kenya. Kenyan rights activists are arrested outside the Tanzanian High Commission in Nairobi after a demonstration in support of the people of Tanzania. The protest was sparked by the cancellation of Tanzania's Independence Day celebrations amid growing concerns over human rights abuses in the country. Let's in fact listen into what some of the protesters have shared.
We are here as patriotic citizens of Kenya. We are here as members of Jumuiya. We are here as activists. We are here as young cadres to stand in solidarity with the people of Tanzania. We know very well that Samia Suluhu do not want people of Tanzania to come out and celebrate their democracy and fight for their
non-violent protests. We are lending voices to Tanzanians that today, a day that should be marked as Independence Day, the president has cancelled the celebration. This is indeed very clear abuse of power. You should allow Tanzanians, especially the young Tanzanians, to celebrate what their founding fathers fought for.
We are here in strong solidarity, cross-border solidarity with our brothers and sisters in Tanzania because of what they are going through. And what they are going through, we in Kenya have gone through that. You remember the Gen Z protests and how many of our people, young people, were killed by the government just for coming out and saying we do not want this kind of governance. And so, let not Kenyans think that we are free, that we are better than Tanzania. We are not. No African country is better off as far as governance is concerned.
Now we have breaking news. Local media has reported that 2 4-story buildings have collapsed in the Moroccan city of Fez, killing at least 19 people, while 16 other people were wounded. With varying degrees of gravity, according to reports, rescue operations are still ongoing in the buildings. And that's a wrap on Africa Brief. Keep watching News X World for more news updates from around the world.